serious problems if you are re-entering the workforce can be a past criminal history. Maybe you've made a mistake. Maybe you've got something in your past that is presenting a barrier to employment. There are a number of people throughout the Western Pennsylvania area who can help people who face those kinds of obstacles. Jane Black is an employment financial coach at Mon Valley Initiative. She works out of the Mid-Mon Valley office in Charleroi, PA. Hello, Jane. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks. How are you doing, Jason?
Very good. And also on the line with us right now is Brian Gorman. He is the Executive Director of Southwestern Pennsylvania Legal Aid. Hello, Brian.
Hi, Jason. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. There's a couple of things we're hoping that the two of you could talk about. One of them is the Washington County Pardon Project. But before we get to that, Jane, I sort of introduced you by saying that one of the obstacles to employment for someone can be a past criminal history. I've heard this thing ban the box on employment applications. Tell us, first of all, what it is that you do at Mon Valley Initiative, and second, let's talk a little bit about this problem of having a criminal history. So first of all, what do you do as an employment and financial coach at MVI?
Well, obviously the number one thing, I'm trying to help people find jobs, and anywhere between 65 and 75% of the people that I'm working with may have had some type of run-in with the law. And obviously it's a spectrum. Some people's are much, I guess, better than others. And I'm so excited that Brian is here because once I found out about Brian, I was able to send him information on people. He could tell me sort of what they're up against. And so like before we get into the Pardon Project, Brian, do you want to talk a little bit about what people are actually eligible for, sometimes like expungements and the different things that are out there?
There are three ways to clear a criminal record in Pennsylvania: expungement, sealing, or pardoning the record. Expunging a record means that the record is destroyed, it no longer exists. Sealing a record is also known as limited access. That means that the record can exist, but can only be seen by limited people in Pennsylvania. That's when there's a Pennsylvania, not a federal background check. Pennsylvania background check, only the courts, law enforcement, and very limited agencies can see it. Your general job employer cannot. And those are for old misdemeanor convictions. I could be more specific if needed, of course. And then thirdly, pardoning a record is for convictions that remain on your record. A conviction always remains on your record. So it can be for any conviction in Pennsylvania. And actually a pardon will give way to an expungement or a destruction of records. So a pardon does become an expungement. But those are the three ways: expunging, sealing, or pardoning a record.
What is typically the criteria that makes people eligible for some of these cleanups, if you will?
First, for expungement, the most common criteria, and I would say 99+% of the time, is that it was a non-conviction, that the case is resolved and you were not convicted by way of dismissal, withdrawal, nol pros, which means dropping, obviously being found not guilty, or a pretrial diversion program. In Pennsylvania, we have two, ARD and probation without verdict, that lead to a dismissal of the charges. That is what you're looking for an expungement. And most people, or many people at least, are not aware that if you're arrested or charged with a crime but not convicted, it does still remain on your record. It remains there as a non-conviction, but will an employer or housing provider make that distinction? We don't know in any given case. Sealing a record is under the Pennsylvania Clean Slate Act, which is a unique, pioneering law of over 3 years ago in Pennsylvania that seals from the public old misdemeanor convictions. They have to be at least 10 years old, over 10 years old. You can't have had a misdemeanor or a felony conviction in the last 10 years. And only certain people and offenses qualify. So it's not for all misdemeanor convictions. And that's where our work comes in to make sure that someone is legally eligible. Now, pardons, there is no legal prohibition to applying for a pardon. Someone could apply for a pardon conceivably on homicide. But you are much more likely if your offense is nonviolent, non-sex offender registration, and has some age to it.
If I can ask Jane and Brian, if I can ask both the question, and either one of you can answer it. And Brian, I think you've just actually answered what I was about to ask. I sense, and I may be wrong on this, that a lot of these may be old DUI conviction, for instance, or you were picked up with a small amount of marijuana or retail theft or something. And this is someone who made a mistake, but since then has kept their nose clean, has stayed out of the system, and is now, unfortunately, they're going for housing, they're going for credit, they're going for employment, which is what we're mostly going to be talking about in this video. And they have to check that box. Have you ever been convicted of a crime? And they have to check that box.
Many of the folks that I work with definitely have problems with their driver's licenses from DUIs or what have you. And it really, really messes up their ability to work because if they can't get there, they're done. So that's one of the reasons why I know recently Brian had mentioned that sort of driver's license advocacy is going to be one of the goals for his organization next year. And it's definitely an area that MVI is going to be looking into to try to help people too, because it's just quite the albatross for people.
Many, well, DUIs are all misdemeanors in Pennsylvania, unless there is some sort of accident and it becomes a homicide or aggravated assault as well. In some of those cases, they're felonies. But yes, DUI is the most prevalent charge in Pennsylvania and probably every other jurisdiction. So there are a ton of people that have DUIs. Any drug and alcohol offense, so long as it didn't lead to violence. Property offenses, you refer to retail theft, other forms of theft, fraud, which are often associated with drugs and alcohol if someone is dependent at the time. Those are the most common offenses that we help people with expunging or sealing records. Those are the most common that are eligible too. Property and drug and alcohol are the nonviolent that I'm speaking of.
And I'm not trying to make excuses for anything. I mean, obviously, the best thing to do is to stay out of the system. But people do make mistakes, and this is one of the reasons why people are often cautioned to avoid some of these problems, because they do follow you for a long, long time. But this is just one of the pathways. If you have made that mistake and you have exited the system, how to get your life back on track.
Just going to ask Brian to just sort of run through what the process is, because I know you've had expungement workshops in the past, and I like to, if I'm going to refer somebody to you, I like to try to help, help them. Do they need to get an official copy of their criminal record and that kind of thing?
Well, under Pennsylvania rules of criminal procedure, when you petition for expunging or sealing your record, you do. You don't need it for a pardon application, but you do need it to petition to expunge your criminal record, unless the district attorney's office in a particular county waives it. However, it's only valid for 60 days for the petition. So you don't want to get that and then go through the process. You want to make sure you're eligible and then make that one of your last steps before you petition. And when you get them online, it only takes about a week now to get your criminal record emailed to you from the state police. So yes, you do need your criminal record to petition to expunge or seal records. And I should mention, this is expunging or sealing Pennsylvania records. So you're getting your Pennsylvania State Police criminal background check. You're expunging or sealing Pennsylvania records. This law applies to Pennsylvania. It doesn't help in Ohio, West Virginia, et cetera, or federally. Those jurisdictions are controlled by their own jurisdictional laws. So we cannot petition to expunge, seal, or for pardon of an Ohio, West Virginia federal offense, etc.
As far as like fees would be concerned, you have to pay a nominal fee, I think, to get a copy of your official background. Is that correct?
It's $22 to get one that's not notarized and $27 to get one that is notarized. Most counties, district attorneys, and courts accept one that is not notarized.
Oh, that's cool.
And if you go into a county you don't know, you could ask the DA's office, do you require the criminal background check? Most of them do, but some of them don't.
How about, you know, any fees or fines or court costs that were associated with what they're trying to expunge or seal? Does that all have to be paid for?
Depends on the what you're seeking, expunging, sealing, or pardoning. If it is sealing a criminal record, you do not have to have them paid. And that is because the record still exists and they can still be collected. So they don't have to be paid for that. However, if you're expunging a record, then they do have to be paid. Of course, if you're expunging a non-conviction, they don't have to be paid because you weren't convicted and don't owe anything on that charge. But if you went through ARD or probation without verdict, which are pretrial probationary programs where you do owe costs for them, you have to have those paid down to zero. And similarly, if you're applying for a pardon, you do have to have all of your costs satisfied either before you apply, or if you apply and you haven't, in your application, you can indicate to the board how in the next year or two you're going to have them paid down, so that assuming you get a hearing before the board of directors, it will be paid down when you go before them. Because if they're making their decision, the application is getting to them and you still owe costs, you'll be disqualified.
How long does it take for these kinds of procedures typically?
Expunging or sealing happens by petition to the county court where the record exists. And depending on the county, it can take days, weeks, or months. Some counties, Allegheny, for example, is bigger, has a bigger backload, and their process takes, last I've heard, about 3 months. Washington County can vary between days and weeks. Same with other counties. So that's a much shorter process than the pardon process, which can take 2 to 3 years, except for cases involving marijuana convictions, or if a DA asks to fast track a conviction, which can take a year or less.
Mhm.
But the pardon process used to take double that even. So 2 to 3 years has been a heck of an advancement. Lieutenant Governor Stack made some advances. Lieutenant Governor Fetterman has made even more. So we're moving in the right direction with the pardons. And my friend Toby from Eastern Pennsylvania would want me to emphasize to people, you can get a pardon. They are granting pardons. If people are given a pardon hearing, they are granting them upwards of 80% if they're granting you a hearing, and you've gotten that far in the process. So people are getting pardons.
Tell me more about the Washington County Pardon Project, because I know there's a process for that. One of what I think is one of the smartest things is that you are going to review a person's chances before we go ahead and try to do an application, right?
Yes, I think what we recognize, we've made some strides with expunging or sealing records. In our program, we cover Washington, Greene, Fayette, and Somerset counties. If you have a record eligible for expungement or sealing, and you financially qualify for us, which is 187.5% of the federal poverty guidelines or below for the household, we'll do the petition for you, and we'll ask the court to waive the costs for you. In most cases, they've been doing that. The filing fee, I should say. We did notice, though, there was a gap, that we had people who had, say, felony conviction for retail theft, which you can get a felony 3 retail theft for a third offense retail theft in your lifetime, regardless of value. You could steal a candy bar and be a convicted felon. Steal beef for your family, and you can be a convicted felon. So there are people with, on the grand scheme of things, much less serious felony offenses than others. And even, where they've had, say, a felony 3, even auto theft, but it's been 25 years and they're now clean and they've had, and they're productive member of society at this point. The Board of Pardons has recognized that some folks are eligible to have a clean slate. but we had done them by advice. A couple we've done, and we just needed to do something more comprehensive, more systemic. And with the help of our partners at Lawyers for Social Equity over in eastern part of Pennsylvania, they've gone county by county to establish pardon projects. And you're on the team, of course. We have a team of people, social services agencies, legal services agencies, governmental services, government officials. Senator Bartolotta has been great with it. The commissioners have a representative, the Human Services Department. So it's a collaboration, and we're also moving into the private sector, as you know. You've talked with clergy and community leaders. We're talking to the private bar association to volunteer. And essentially what we're doing is we're identifying as many good candidates, the criteria we've established, and getting a list of them and candidly ranking them so that we can get to the ones with the best chance first, and matching them with volunteer coaches. You don't have to be an attorney to apply for a pardon, and to help somebody apply for a pardon. And the coach is there to look at the application, make sure that it's complete, that it's on point as to the factors the Board of Pardons is looking at, and that it's submitted. The process can be overwhelming. I'm sure you've seen that with driver's licenses. Criminal history can be overwhelming to the layperson, and we're helping them actually get them submitted, get them into the system. So we've got several dozen people that are good candidates, and at least a couple dozen, if not more, that are volunteers, and we're about ready to go here.
Yeah, I know too, you mentioned like when we go to do these applications, we're gonna need the actual form filled out, obviously, but court documents. And you were saying too, like maybe letters of references, that kind of thing would help a pardon application.
Two you mentioned are required. The last one is recommended. The application itself is a form that is not difficult to fill out. It's a free application. You don't have to pay to submit a pardon application. The forms that you need from the court are your criminal records pertaining to that case. Criminal complaint, affidavit of probable cause, what we call the criminal information, plea and sentence orders, and those things satisfying costs. You don't have to memorize that, what I just said. It's on the instructions on the application. You can get those from the clerk of courts in whatever county the record exists in. The last part relates to one of the factors, and that is, what have you done to rehabilitate yourself? I don't mean necessarily just drug and alcohol, just be a different person than the person who committed the offense. And that can be demonstrated by letters of reference from friends, family, the prosecutor, the judge, probation officer, community leaders, employers, colleagues, even sometimes the victim will say, and they will be contacted. That's one of the factors. But those are recommended, that you have letters of reference also submitted. But that's the job of the pardon coach, is to help guide people through that process, which isn't a difficult thing to do. We're currently matching 1-to-1, and then we're seeing if a coach will take a second person. And I'd speculate it's a few hours of volunteering.
And I know that you've mentioned the importance of not relitigating the case, more or less owning what happened, and that it's helpful for it to be in the person's own words, right?
Yes. One of the questions is, tell us what happened in the case, and that would be in the person's own words. So the coach is just there for editing suggestions, that sort of thing, but also to keep them on point. Some people tend to want to, it's hard to say what you've done wrong in the past, even if you are the most conciliatory person. Some people want to revisit, relitigate the case, either say, you have to understand, the excuse behind what happened, or my process wasn't fair, my lawyer wasn't good. Bad idea. They're pardoning you from something you've done. So this is the time to own up to it and say, that person who did that is different than the person who's coming before you now.
Right. Besides, and I mean, we touched on sort of the most obvious things that people can, it'll be easier for them to get jobs or promotions or credit or housing, even admissions into school. But there was also sort of a monetary impact statement made by the, I believe it was the Economy League. And I'm sure, I mean, I actually put it in that one email because this is one of the things that I hope people will know. The impact is 50% higher in areas of low-income communities, and that they said pardons should be considered a no-cost workforce development and neighborhood investment tool, which, I mean, to me just is mind-blowing because, you know, we're all talking about what can we do to, you know, with workforce development and so on. And this is a free thing that can be done that definitely has an impact. And they've studied that, right?
Undoubtedly, 1 in 3 Americans has been arrested for a misdemeanor or lifetime. In their lifetime. So I hope we would all agree that 1 in 3 Americans is not a bad person. Or at least is worthy of employment, setting aside how we feel about each other. The Clean Slate Act and the advancement of pardons is a bipartisan and has widespread acceptance because people, regardless of their social and political views, have different reasons and sometimes multiple reasons for wanting to give people a second chance, or as we say here, a clean slate from their past. Some people come at it from the employment perspective. Hey, I'd like to be able to hire some of these folks, and I can't because of liability reasons or policy reasons. And it's affecting my employment, my staffing, and I can't produce like I'd like to as an employer. And others come at it from a more of a social justice perspective or a redemptive perspective, or some people have multiple reasons, but it is something that has nearly universal support.
Yeah.
As we note, as you've seen, rest in peace to Gene Vitone, his passing, unfortunately. But the prosecutor in the county, you see on the calls, the Pardon Project team is comprised of the prosecutor and chief probation officer.
Yeah.
So it has very few detractors, at least among those in the know.
Right. And you had mentioned too that once it gets filed or stamped in, there needs to be an investigation done by a PO. Is that correct?
Yes, and this can get to a bit of a frustrating part of pardons where people need to have a little patience and think long term on it. When you file it, when you submit it to the pardon board, it just sits there for a while because of the number they've had. 9 months, maybe 12 months down the road, it gets stamped, filed, and that's when the process begins. It gets assigned to an agent that's actually employed by the Board of Probation and Parole, but their job is to do like a background check like you might think of a federal background check, where they come to your home, to your place of employment. If you're working, they talk to your neighbors, your family and friends, colleagues. So they actually do a written report to the board of directors. And that fact finding is what the board relies on, in addition to the application and the record, in determining who they will grant a hearing to. They don't have to grant a hearing to you, but if they'll grant you a hearing, then you're in the game and much more likely to get it.
Do you know how long those investigations typically take?
Well, I can't speak as to how long it takes from day the file gets to the PO and the day they submit the report, but it's at least 6 months, and it may take. It probably is about a 6-month process, but between getting then to the board and then the board's review of it, it's a couple years before you find out if you have a hearing. If you get notice you have a hearing less than 2 years from the time you submit it to the Board of Pardons, you are moving along pretty quickly. And they continue to try to do better with that. But when they have said they want to do more pardons, that obviously spawns more applications, which backs things up a little bit in and of itself. And if I could just make one more comment about the timing, Jane.
Mhm. Sure.
When the Board of Pardons recommends a pardon, they have to do, there's 5 of them. So you need at least 3 votes to recommend a pardon. It then goes to the governor. So that's a recommendation. So it could take a few more months. And sometimes it takes 9 months before you get the governor to sign off on it. So there's been a lot of people lobbying the governor's office to please move this along once you get the recommendation. It's been vetted very heavily before it gets to you. So can you maybe not spend so much time reviewing it? And again, I think they've made some strides too, but we're not patient with this, and we want them to make it as quick as they absolutely can, of course.
Right, right. And the board, they only meet what, 4 times a year, so you have to get on the slate like that as well. So that's another factor, I guess, for timing.
They do. Now they've increased the number of people they're seeing. They're seeing dozens and dozens of people in one day. When I went about 3+ years ago, it was 18. So they've heavily increased the number of people that they're seeing. But you're right, it's quarterly. It can be viewed on YouTube in case anybody has applied or is coaching and just wants to check out a session.
Any other things to share about this particular? I know we just touched briefly, but Allegheny County has its own team that does Pardon Project. I think I know I have the website and everything. I can give that to anybody. And it's really just sort of a handful of counties so far, but I know that we're working on it. So that's been good.
Yeah, the only other comment I make, Jane, is you could email me at pardonme@splas.org, pardonme@splas.org, if you're interested in being either a coach or if you think you might be a good candidate or know someone who's a good candidate for a pardon. All I need is name and date of birth, as you know, and I'll check out their record and tell them what they're eligible for. The other thing that it's important that I mention is that if your record has been expunged, sealed, or pardoned, clean slate law says that you can treat that as though it has never existed for an employment application or answering any questions to an employer. If a record's been expunged, sealed, or pardoned, you say no when they ask about, have you even been charged with an offense? Just, it does not exist. With one exception, if you've been sealed and you have a federal background check, it will still show up because this is a Pennsylvania background check. Then you would still have to admit its existence because that's a federal check and this is just sealing in Pennsylvania.
It sounds, Brian, like what you're looking for is people who do have that past that they have, no pun intended, gotten past and are taking responsibility for it, right? That's where you are likely to get the pardon granted, the expungement granted, when it was a nonviolent offense, it was a drug and alcohol or perhaps property, and you have accepted responsibility for it, and you're trying to get your life back on track, which is why you're working with someone like Jane or another employment or financial coach. Is that all accurate?
That is all accurate.
Yeah.
And the people that we most help are people primarily who are in recovery. That's the number one cause of somebody to have a criminal record. So that's common. People who have graduated from drug court or have just been clean. The one caveat I'll give and disclaimer, I should say, is some people are well entrenched in recovery, but their record's not that old. They might have a 2019 record, a 2018 record. I just preach patience with them. I understand that they've gone through the ringer and that they've made it out the other side, and now they do deserve some, at least positive reinforcement, if not reward for that. But the law and the board do need to see some time, and time. While 2 years sobriety deserves great congratulations, 2 years without a criminal record by the Pennsylvania Board of Pardons is not seen as substantial enough. Our minimum criteria is 3 years. The board would like to see at least 5 years. There's no law on it, but those are the criteria. But having said that, the longer the better in terms of separation from the offense.
Right. And that's the hardest part is the patients, especially working with guys who've just been released. And I say, oh, I can give you information about expungement. And I'm thinking, I should have saved that for a little bit later in the conversation.
It's hard for somebody who's 30, 35, even 40 to think about things. Certainly if you're 20, even talking to people, but 30, 35, 40 to think about things when they're 45, 50, 60 years old. It's still going to matter then.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, they told us when we were kids it was going to go on your permanent record, and I guess they were right. I don't mean to make light of it, but these things do. It's shocking that a decision that you made when you were 19 or 20, and I think back how foolish I was when I was 19. I think how foolish I am now. But when I was 19 or 20, that a decision like that can follow you and kind of haunt you almost for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
If someone is watching this and they or someone that they know or someone in their family is in this kind of a situation where they have a past criminal record that could be from 2019 or could be from 2011, 2000, 1999, and they want to finally get this cleaned up, what's the first step? Should they call you, Jane, or should they call you, Brian, or where should they start out at?
Well, they can definitely, I automatically refer my people who are appropriate to Brian or to Ed Stevenson in Allegheny County, because I tell them this is way outside my scope of understanding. But then we can still talk about things like, please don't judge me on this one thing that I've done, and or this particular thing is not going to affect my ability to do this job that I'm applying for, and just different ways to talk about, it was a mistake. I don't plan on making it again. Those kinds of things. But I definitely get them over to Brian as soon as I can.
Right. I just add that I think it depends on their needs. If someone, we're not an employment service. We handle this narrow scope of the employment. Well, I call it narrow. Jane mentioned it's about 2/3 of the people, but that have this issue. But if people need broader than just expungement or sealing of their record, services related to employment, then obviously they should go to MVI. But people can come directly to us if they just have inquiries about removing criminal record. We'll do intake, set up a call. I'll determine if they are, and if so, I'll do the materials for them. But our most common referral source are employment agencies like yourself. So either way, it's fine. But again, I mean, if they have any needs beyond expungement or sealing of criminal records, then they would go to an agency like yours.
Best way to reach out to your agency?
1-800-846-0871 is our central number. You can also email us at legalservices@splas.org, splas.org, or pardon me at splas.org. The secret is they all come to me.
Of course they do. The buck stops there. And which geographic areas does your agency serve?
Well, legal aids cover all 67 counties. I want to note that. We cover 4: Washington, Greene, Somerset, and Fayette. Our partners in Allegheny, Butler, Beaver, and Lawrence are neighborhood legal services. Our partners in Westmoreland and 5 other counties in that area, including Cambria and others, are Laurel Legal Services. And if people come to me and they should be at Laurel or neighborhood, I'll send them over to Laurel neighborhood, just with again, a disclaimer that I can't guarantee what neighborhood of Laurel can do. We are not, as legal aids, we do a variety of work. So we're not just expungement agencies.
Yeah. And Jane, best way for someone who may or may not have this problem, maybe doesn't have any kind of a criminal background, but is out of work, is re-entering the workforce after an absence, or is underemployed, or looking for some better career options, looking for some financial coaching.
565. I want to make sure I'm not giving the wrong number. 8040. Also, emailing me is a great way. So it's J as in Jane, Black, BLACK, at monvalleyinitiative.com. And I do have a Google Voice number, which will be on my, if, I email the person, they'll have that. But yeah, we can start an intake immediately. Some of the most important things that I'm gonna need when they talk to me is what's their employment history, so we can get the resume template together, and really just things that they're looking for. And then we open it up to career link, and thinking about what kinds of things you want to do and what kinds of things you've done and don't ever want to do again or whatever. So yeah.
Sure enough. Brian Gorman from Southwestern Pennsylvania Legal Aid, any final thoughts before we let you go?
Final comment, we do have a pardon project coordinator named Kyle Duff. Now, people can reach me and I'll then connect them with Kyle, as already happened by referrals or connections with Jane and others. But Kyle Duff, D-U-F-F, is coordinating it. So if somebody does contact me, they can expect they'll soon talk to Kyle.
We've been talking about the Washington County Pardon Project and also about the obstacles that someone faces if they have a past criminal history and are applying for credit, buying a house, or applying for a job. We've been talking with Brian Gorman. He's the executive director of Southwestern Pennsylvania Legal Aid. You can find them online at spla.org. Also with us this morning has been Jane Black. She's an employment and financial coach with Mon Valley Initiative. She works out of the Mid-Mon office, which is on McCain Avenue in Charleroi, monvalleyinitiative.com or 724-565-8040. Any final thoughts from you, Jane?
There is going to be a pardon coach training session August 31st. So if anybody is interested, if they are able to reach out to Brian within that time frame, they might be able to attend that first training. That's what it was. And that we're happy to be here to help. So.
And if it's after that, we'll have a recording.
Mm-hmm.
Brian, Jane, thank you so much for taking some time to explain this to folks today. I think I've learned something, and I hope that the folks watching have learned something too. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason.
Yeah, thanks. My pleasure.